Hi, I'm Leni Reed. I'm a registered dietitian and founder of a company called Supermarket Savvy. At Supermarket Savvy, we conduct nutrition tours of supermarkets, like the one you're about to see on this video. And we give talks about how to shop for healthier foods. We also offer a training program for people who would like to start giving their own nutrition tours of supermarkets. I guess I'm really a teacher at heart. For 6 years, I taught nutrition at the college level, and for many years now, I've written articles for newspapers and magazines. Currently, I'm collaborating on a cookbook for the American Heart Association. I think you'll really enjoy this tape and learn a lot from it. But do remember, it's only a general tour that introduces label reading and other basic nutrition information for healthy adults, not including pregnant women and people with special diet restrictions. It is not intended as nutrition counseling and should not be used as such. Further, each one of us is distinct and has special nutritional needs, so be sure to check with your personal physician, dietitian, nutrition counselor, and hospital experts about your particular needs. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself, and enjoy your next trip to the supermarket. Did you know that if you are now using a tablespoon of butter or margarine a day, and you use non-fat butter granules such as butter buds instead, you could lose up to 10 pounds in 1 year. If you currently use at least a tablespoon and a half of regular salad dressing every day, and you substitute a salad dressing that's as low in calories as this one, you could lose up to another 10 pounds in a year. And if you now drink 2 cups of whole milk every day, and you switch to 2 cups of skim or 0.5% low-fat milk instead, you might have to buy a whole new wardrobe. With practical information about how to select nutritious, lower-calorie foods, you can lose weight or not gain weight and feel better without that deprived feeling of being on a diet. This tape will take you up and down the aisles of a supermarket and teach you how to read product labels so you can make smarter decisions when it comes to selecting healthier products for you and your family. And now let's meet the members of our tour group.
I'm Pam. I grew up in Connecticut and I now live in California. My husband used to be a vegetarian, has now worked his way up the food chain somewhat. We eat a very lean diet. We're also concerned about our health because my mother died early of cancer. His father died of heart disease.
Hi, I'm Philip, and I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas. I am a borderline diabetic. My dad is diabetic, and my granddad was diabetic. My wife and I would like to know how to read the labels when we go to the supermarket, and then how to prepare them so they can control my sugar.
I'm Betty. I raised 3 children with varying tastes, and now that it's just my husband and I am enjoying very much the lean diet, and we're all hearing that people are living longer, and I'm glad I'm part of that.
I'm Jim. I had a triple bypass heart surgery over a year ago, and I have a definite need to cut my cholesterol and my sodium intake, and I travel quite a bit, and I am single, and it's very hard for me to prepare meals, so I'm trying to learn more about how to cut down cholesterol and sodium.
I'm Joanne. I'm from England. I have a busy schedule. I take care of a 15-month-old boy during the day and also go to school. I find that I eat on the run and I need to prepare foods quickly, but also I'd like to find foods that are also nutritious but taste good as well.
I'm Tanya. I'm a single professional, and I'd like to lose some weight. My doctor hasn't put me on a strict diet, but whenever I see her, she always tells me to watch what I eat. My problem is that I eat out a lot, and when I cook at home, I like to fix the meals like lasagna with lots of cheese and amaretto chocolate cheesecake. How can I prepare tasty meals that are low-calorie?
Our tour group has a variety of concerns: preventing heart disease and cancer, controlling diabetes, and losing weight. You know, the diet for all of these is just a healthy diet with refinements for each specific situation and individual needs. As we go through the store, we will discuss different aspects of a healthy diet, but for now, let's start with a little background information. Food falls into 3 broad categories: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Protein and carbohydrate have 4 calories a gram, and fat has 9. So clearly, fat is more fattening than protein or carbohydrate. On the average, Americans get about 36% of their day's calories from fat. The American Heart Association currently recommends that to help prevent heart disease, healthy adults should keep their fat intake under 30% of their day's calories. That's because a high-fat diet, especially one high in saturated fat, is associated with an increased risk of heart disease. A high-fat diet is also associated with an increased risk of certain forms of cancer. So you see, reducing our fat intake could make us look better and stay healthier. So where is all this fat coming from? It's more than just the butter on toast, the sour cream on baked potatoes, and the dressing on salad. What about the fat in other foods, such as meat, milk, cheese, eggs, and prepared foods like frozen dinners? Let's take a look at 2 frozen dinners. This fried chicken has 260 calories and 17 grams of fat in a serving. We know that each gram of fat has 9 calories. So if we multiply 9 times 17, we see that 153 calories come from fat. If we divide the calories from fat by the total number of calories, in this case 260, we get the percent of calories from fat. So you see, over half of the calories in this frozen dinner come from fat. Now let's look at our second frozen dinner, chicken in orange sauce. It has 280 calories and 5 grams of fat in one serving. 5 grams multiplied by 9 calories per gram is 45 calories from fat. If we divide that by 280, the total calories per serving, we see that this frozen dinner has only about 16% of its calories from fat. So, as you can see, the chicken in orange sauce would be a better choice for dinner, even though it has 20 more calories than the fried chicken. Now let's look a little closer. How is it possible that the food with less fat has more calories? The answer lies in the serving size. The fried chicken is 6.5 ounces, while the chicken in orange sauce is 8 ounces. Now, which would you rather have? The healthiest calories or the fewest? Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I find that most all frozen foods have a lot of sodium content.
Yes.
And that's something that I have to watch. And that's hard for me to buy anything that's frozen.
Well, you know, let's talk about sodium a minute. Why is it that we need to restrict sodium? To lower blood pressure, is that correct in
my case?
In your situation? Okay. To lower blood pressure or to help prevent the onset of high blood pressure. There is research that shows that over a long period of time, if you take in an excess amount of sodium, you might be more likely to develop high blood pressure if you're susceptible to that sort of thing, genetically susceptible. But since we don't know who is genetically susceptible and who isn't, it's best that all of us try to prevent high blood pressure with a lower sodium diet. And you know, and then I say to myself too, the other benefits of a low sodium diet is that you don't get bloated, your rings don't get tight, and your belts fit better, because sodium retains water in the body, and the more water you retain, the more puffy and all you get to feel. So there's cosmetic benefits to lowering the sodium in your diet. But how low should you go is an important question. The American Heart Association recommends that under 3,000 milligrams a day come from sodium. 3,000 milligrams a day from sodium or under 3,000 milligrams of sodium. Now, that's a big number. And yet, it's easy to get a lot of sodium and to even surpass that if you eat out a lot and like Chinese dinners, real high in sodium. Or if you don't look carefully at your labels and you end up buying those that are high in sodium. There are now a lot that are also acceptable in the range of sodium. And I'd recommend that when it comes to a frozen dinner that you get something that's under 800 milligrams of sodium. That way, with a couple hundred more milligrams of sodium at that meal from the fruit and the salad and the bread that you eat together with it, it'll be around 1,000. And if each meal of your 3 is around 1,000 milligrams a day, you won't exceed. You'll probably be under, or not exceed by much, 3,000. And that's 3,000 a day.
we really want to try to stay under it.
Is sodium just salt?
Sodium is present in salt. Salt is sodium and chloride. But sodium is present in a lot of other things that we take in, like monosodium glutamate, like sodium bicarbonate, etc. There's a lot of different things, and when you look at a label, look at the list of ingredients, and you will see a lot of additives that have sodium in them. And if the item doesn't tell you the milligrams of sodium per serving, you know, if it doesn't have that sort of labeling, then just look at the list of ingredients and see how many times you see the word sodium and where it appears on the list to tell how much sodium relatively there is in it. If salt or a word with sodium appears at the top of that list of ingredients, that means there's more than if more sodium than if it appeared later on in the list of ingredients, because the list of ingredients is such that whatever comes first there's more of than anything else. Whatever's last there's least of, and so on down the line. And now let's all go downstairs and put this knowledge to practical use. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is find a cheese that you're interested in knowing more about and pick it up and let's talk about it. Take your calculators and calculate the percent of calories from fat in the cheese that you have. And as soon as you have the number, the percent of calories from fat, I'd like you to line up from the lowest to the highest percent. So ask your neighbor what their percent is and find out where you belong in a line. The lowest percent.
I got 56.
73.
All right, the lowest percent over here and the highest over here.
3 contenders?
Okay, I'm 56.
Great.
Okay.
73.
All right, let's start on the low end. Betty, what was the percent of calories from fat in this low-calorie processed cheese?
36.
36. And Tanya, what do you have in your mozzarella?
56%.
Okay, 56. We're getting a little bit higher. And our Parmesan, Jim?
I have 62%.
Okay, 62. Joanne?
In my favorite cheese, I have 67.
67. We're getting on up there. Philip?
In cheddar, we had 73%.
73% in cheddar. And Pam?
Mine is almost all fat. This is a low-salt, reduced fat, part skim milk cheese that is 80%.
It's amazing.
80% fat.
80% of the calories
All
are
it is.
fat.
Squish, squish.
Higher than cheddar, and yet the label says, just what you said, a reduced, what does it say? You read it to
Low
me.
salt, reduced fat.
The label says that it's a reduced fat cheese, and yet it is higher in fat than cheddar or any of the other cheeses we have here.
Staggering.
So, one of the things that this points out is how important it is to read the fine print on the label. You see, reduced fat doesn't have to be reduced by a lot, obviously. And then again, we don't know what they started out with, maybe 100% fat. So, be sure to read the fine print and you won't be fooled by the bold print. Now let's talk about some of these cheeses individually. I like to compare this processed cheese to cheddar. What we have with cheddar is a relatively high-fat cheese, 73% of the calories from fat. And this cheddar is used to make a processed cheese like this one here, where it is, however, low fat, but much higher in sodium. So generally what you have is a trade-off, fat for sodium. Mozzarella cheese is part skim, but it really is pretty low fat. It's lower than cheddar, and it melts like cheddar, so you can substitute it in some recipes for cheddar. Or you might do a combination. Use a little cheddar, and always use extra sharp, because you know a little extra sharp goes a long way. And grate it and put it on the top of things, and you'll think you're getting a lot. And then use some mozzarella for the rest of the cheese. The cheese that's inside. Yeah, it's good in lasagna. Really. And what about lunches for children? I want to show you something. String cheese. This is a great cheese. String cheese is part skim mozzarella cheese, just in string form. And you give this to your kids and they'll take them all afternoon to eat it, because they'll be making like little long spaghetti-like strings by pulling it apart. And they'll like it. And you know that you're giving them a relatively lower fat cheese.
And what about cream cheese?
Cream cheese, I'm glad you asked. Well, cream cheeses are really high in fat. Just think of the name, cream cheese. Actually, a regular cream cheese has about 90% of its calories from fat. That's even higher than your 80. And what about those light or lower fat cream cheeses? Actually, they are lower fat, but not all that much lower. They tend to be 75 to 78% of the calories from fat. And so as you can see, they're really on the high end, whether they're light, low fat, or lower fat cream cheeses or regular. So you know what I do? I use a lot of part skim ricotta cheese instead of cream cheese. Something like this. It's really good. I'll put it on toast and bagels and get the feel and the taste of cream cheese, but not the fat.
We're talking about how high cheese is in fat, but I understand it's a very good source of calcium. What about that?
Betty, it's like a balancing act. Look at the whole day. When we're talking about getting under 30% of your day's calories from fat, we're talking about your whole day's intake. And if you are eating something high in fat, like a cheddar cheese, then accompany that with the low-fat foods like apples, pears, fruits, vegetables, where by having calories which have very little fat to balance off the calories which have a lot of fat, over the entire day you're going to average out to a much lower percent of fat than the cheese itself. So it means having a little bit of a high-fat cheese and a lot of the low-fat things to go with it. The reason why many cheeses are high in fat is because it takes a lot of milk to make a little cheese. Roughly speaking, it takes a gallon of whole milk to make a pound of cheddar cheese. There are about 32 pats of butter in each gallon of whole milk, and this butter ends up in the cheese. So use lower fat cheeses like part skim mozzarella, part skim ricotta, and low fat cottage cheese. Of course, using skim or 1/2% low fat milk is another good way to reduce your fat intake. Also, in many recipes you can substitute non-fat yogurt for sour cream, or use a lower fat sour cream such as lean cream. Labels on lunch meats can be extremely confusing. Take this one for example. It says 82% fat-free and 18% fat. This means that only 18% of the weight of the product is from fat. Sounds great, right? Well, not really. You see, when you look closer and calculate the percent of calories from fat, by using the formula we showed you earlier, you will discover that 75% of the calories come from fat, and that's a lot. So don't let yourself be misled. Be sure to read the fine print and calculate the percent of calories from fat. Then decide which product is right for you. You will probably find a few surprises. For instance, ham, at about 30% of the calories from fat, is not only leaner than some turkey hams, but is also leaner than regular cottage cheese. Chicken and turkey franks vary from brand to brand, so read these labels very carefully. In some cases, they're even higher in fat than their regular counterparts. When using lunch meats, you can remove some of the sodium by rinsing individual slices under cold running water and patting them dry with white paper towels. But remember, in doing so, you are rinsing off some of the preservatives, and therefore you should eat the lunch meat right away. Okay, here we are at the fish counter, and as you can see, we have a beautiful selection. Did you know that fish is a heart-healthy food? Here is one, salmon. Salmon is high in this substance called omega-3 fatty acids, the heart-healthy substance in fish. There are other fish that are high in omega-3s, and mackerel is another good example. Now, do you have any questions?
I've heard that shellfish is very high in cholesterol.
Yes, shellfish can be high in cholesterol. It depends which ones. We used to think that shellfish was extremely high in cholesterol, Jim, but in fact, we now know that it's not quite as high as we used to think, which is good news. Most of us like things like shrimp and lobster. Shrimp is particularly high, still is. Lobster is on the high end, but not as high as shrimp. There are other fish that are high in cholesterol, and sardines is one of those. Sardines, so it's really shrimp, lobster, and sardines. When buying fresh fish, keep it in your refrigerator sandwiched between 2 layers of ice.
It should keep well for 1 to 2 days. And here's a good tip. If it smells real fishy, it's no longer fresh. Here we have ground chicken breast. It's a wonderfully lean item that you can use to make things like chili. You know, chili is the sort of one-dish meal where the fat doesn't have a chance to drip out. And when you're making something where the fat doesn't have any place else to go, then why not use a very lean item like ground chicken breast? You can make this yourself if your store doesn't have it. Simply buy skinless, boneless chicken breasts and put them in your food processor fitted with the metal blade, and just pulse that a couple times and you'll see how it will become kind of a coarse ground chicken breast. Try it. I think you'll really like it. Next to the chicken breast, we see the liver. Now, your mother may have told you that liver's a really healthy food, but I beg to differ with your mother. Actually, liver is high in cholesterol because it's the organ in the body that makes cholesterol. So when you eat liver, you take in a lot of cholesterol, and as you know, cholesterol that you take in your diet raises your blood cholesterol. There's also a second reason why I don't recommend liver. Liver is the organ that detoxifies the blood, and therefore, when the animal is killed, not all the toxins have been disposed of. And so by ingesting liver, you could be ingesting lots of toxins as well. So for that reason, I personally don't recommend liver. It is high in iron and it is high in vitamin A, but you can get those nutrients elsewhere, as we'll see later on the tour. Now, what about lean meats? There are lots of good lean meats to choose from, and I'm just going to point out a few. Here we have flank steak, a very lean meat, which you would want to tenderize. There are lots of other cuts, and it's best to befriend your butcher and ask him what is on special that week and what is particularly lean. He really does know that sort of thing. And if your store doesn't have quite the selection that this store does, your butcher may be able to order it in special for you with a couple days' notice. So just ask and see what cooperation you get.
Lady, I have never heard of ground chicken. You said you can fix it in chili. Are there any other ways to fix it?
Well, actually, ground chicken breast can be used just like hamburger meat. You could make hamburgers, tacos, and that sort of thing. Or the other day, I used it to make meatballs. And you can sometimes combine the chicken breast ground with the hamburger and see how you like that. Try it. I think you will. Now let's move on to poultry. Well, here we are at chicken. As you may know, chicken is a lean food, especially the white meat. The dark meat is a little higher in fat, but not all that much. Do you have any questions about chicken?
I'd like to know about using the chicken that has no skin on it, or taking it off after you've bought it with the skin on.
Actually, Betty, you will get less fat if you cook your meat without the skin on it. There is about a 20% transfer of the fat from the skin into the meat. So your best way is to cook without the skin, but your second best bet is to cook with the skin, but just don't eat the skin itself. Now let's move on. Okay, let's talk about oils. First of all, what oils do you use? Most of you use. Anybody?
I use corn oil.
Corn oil.
Because it doesn't have any cholesterol.
Because it doesn't have any cholesterol. That's very interesting. You know, a lot of these say no cholesterol. You've probably seen it when looking at labels. Well, actually, no vegetable oil ever contained any cholesterol. Because cholesterol is made by the liver of an animal. And since corn and soybean and all these vegetable oils don't have livers, they can't have any cholesterol. But they can raise your blood cholesterol. You see, saturated fats raise blood cholesterol even though they don't have any cholesterol themselves. Here's a good example. This is pure coconut oil. A very saturated fat. In fact, coconut and palm oil, these tropical oils, are more saturated than even lard. That means they're worse for your heart than even lard. Okay? Yet, remember, it has no cholesterol.
but it raises blood cholesterol. Something to watch for on the labels when you read the fine print on labels. See what kind of oil they're using. Is it coconut or palm? Now let's talk about other kinds of fat. Besides the saturated, there are the unsaturated fats. There's the polyunsaturated fat, which you've probably heard lots about in recent years. And then there's the monounsaturated fat. Monounsaturated fat and poly have some similarities and some differences. The similarity is that both of them lower total blood cholesterol and thereby help to lower your risk of heart disease. However, the polyunsaturated seems to lower the good blood cholesterol, the HDL, whereas the monounsaturated fat does not seem to lower the good cholesterol. So now the American Heart Association recommends that we get a balance of these fats. Okay? They say that, of course, that we should get under 30% of our day's calories from fat, with under 10% from polyunsaturated, and we'll look at some sources in a minute, and under 10% from saturated fat, with the rest from monounsaturated fat. All right, so now let's look at some sources of polyunsaturated fat first, and then mono. Polyunsaturated are the things like our vegetable oils here, which are corn and soybean. Safflower is polyunsaturated also. In fact, safflower is extremely polyunsaturated, very high in polyunsaturates. But where do you find your monounsaturates? Well, you find it in things like olive oil. You also find monounsaturates in canola oil, which is made from rapeseed. Now, you may not have heard of that before, rapeseed. Actually, rapeseed is a cousin of mustard seed. And it's high in monounsaturated fats. And here's a product that is made of the rapeseed, and they call it canola oil. Same thing, rapeseed or canola oil. And this is very high in monounsaturated fat. It's best to store oil in the refrigerator. This helps prevent it from going rancid. And not only does rancid oil taste bad, it's bad for you. Since olive oil hardens when cold, you might want to keep a few weeks' supply in the cupboard. And be sure to wash out the old oil before you fill the jar again. Now, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do. What are the foods that have good cholesterol?
No, Jim, there actually aren't any foods that contain HDL cholesterol. But by what you eat, you can affect your blood level of HDL cholesterol. With margarine, the trick is to select the brand which has more polyunsaturated than saturated fat. The American Heart Association has recommended that you look for a margarine that has at least twice as much polyunsaturated as saturated fat. Further, they recommend that a liquid vegetable oil, such as corn or soybean oil, be the first ingredient listed. If you see a hydrogenated vegetable oil listed first, keep on looking. In lower calorie margarines, where water is listed first, check the second ingredient. It should be a liquid vegetable oil. Not only do egg yolks contain cholesterol, they have quite a few calories too, about 60 calories each. But egg whites have practically no fat and only about 20 calories each. So use this tip when fixing breakfast. If you want to make an omelet for 2 people, use 1 whole egg and 3 egg whites. This way, each person only gets half a yolk. Using egg whites in place of whole eggs works in many baked goods too. If your recipe calls for 1 egg, try 2 egg whites. To help prevent heart disease, the American Heart Association recommends no more than 2 eggs a week, including those in cooking. Now let's rejoin the tour group and talk about snacks. Okay, cheers everybody. This is a no salt added V8 juice, and it's really delicious. Why don't you try it and see? What do you think?
Very good.
That's not bad.
It's not. It's very good.
Has kind of a fresh taste to it. Not as I really like it. It comes in these little containers, and sometimes I'll keep them in my car for a quick snack when I'm on the road and don't have time to stop and get a drink. It's very handy. And these are rice cakes. Have you had rice cakes before?
Sure.
Yeah?
Children
Well,
love them.
your kids love them. Great. Well, this is one of my favorite foods. I put a little bit of peanut butter, not a lot. Now, does anybody have any questions about the tour so far, about anything you're learning?
I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I have no appetite whatsoever when I get up. I really believe these rice cakes would be terrific for me in the morning.
That'd be great. The only thing, Philip, since you are diabetic, it would be important to follow the meal plan that's set out for you by your nutrition counselor or dietitian, and maybe to meet with them again and see how to work them into your meal plan.
My doctor has told me to have more iron in my diet, and I've taken a supplement, but I wondered if you could recommend a food to me that would give me the recommended daily allowance of iron.
Well, Joanne, it's not really possible to get the recommended daily allowance of iron, which is quite a bit, in just 1 or 2 foods or 1 or 2 servings of something a day, because it's actually very hard to get enough iron. Most women, in fact, eating a well-balanced diet may not get enough iron. And so one of the key things I could recommend to you is that you have more citrus or vitamin C containing foods along with your meals, because that will enhance the iron absorption. You may in fact triple the iron absorption, which means that there's 3 times as much iron available to your body than there would be otherwise. And this is a good example of something that's high in vitamin C. Orange juice is of course another example, and a lot of our fruits and vegetables, like for instance melons, cantaloupe, strawberries, green pepper, cabbage even has vitamin C. But continue to follow your doctor's advice. And now let's continue with the tour. Here's a good choice when it comes to salad dressings. It's a low-calorie salad dressing, a vinaigrette. And it's made with ingredients that you would have in your cupboards, that you would use to make your own salad dressing. Water, vinegar, salt, spices, onion, things like that, things that you recognize and can pronounce. Unlike this salad dressing, which has a long paragraph of ingredients that sounds more like the chemistry textbook. Now let's go on and talk about mayonnaise. As you can see, we have the light, lower calorie mayonnaises, and we still have, of course, the regular mayonnaises. The lower calorie ones are a good choice. They're lower in fat and of course lower in calories. The first ingredient on the label of a lower calorie mayonnaise is almost always water. They've simply diluted the mayonnaise by adding water. However, every tablespoon that you use has about half the calories of regular mayonnaise. So to eat lower fat, a diet mayonnaise, a light mayonnaise, is a good idea. Now we're going to move on to condiments. Try using just a splash of a fine vinegar, like balsamic vinegar, on your salad. It has a wonderful flavor, so you won't miss the oil. Also, try substituting mustard for mayonnaise on your sandwiches. It's lower in fat. Adding a little heat in the form of salsa, picante sauce, or hot pepper sauce can enhance the flavor of foods cooked without salt. And you can add just a dash to foods without making them actually taste hot. Herbs can really liven up your food too. I really like to use fresh herbs. To keep them fresh, treat them like cut flowers. Put them in a jar with a little water, cover loosely with a plastic bag, and refrigerate. Change the water every few days, and most herbs will keep well for a week or so. But if it's basil, set it in a sunny window. Of course, you may want to use dried herbs. They're so convenient. To make them taste more like they've been just picked, here's a tip. Add a few teaspoons of chopped fresh parsley to whatever you're cooking. Also, look for the American Heart Association spices. Here's one of my favorites. It's a delightful lemon pepper. In fact, it's one of the few lemon peppers that has no salt. Soy sauce has over 1,000 milligrams of sodium per tablespoon. And even many of the lower sodium soy sauces have 500 to 600 milligrams a tablespoon. But Worcestershire sauce has only about 160 milligrams in a tablespoon, and it adds a lot of flavor. Use pickles and olives sparingly. They're high in sodium too. Well, what about artificial sweeteners? In my opinion, the long-term effects on humans have not been adequately studied. So what I would suggest to you is that you be very cautious, that you not get hooked on artificial sweeteners, and you just learn to appreciate the natural sweet taste of real foods.
And instead of sweetening with an artificial sweetener, why not use just apple juice concentrate, the frozen apple juice concentrate, for instance, is a really wonderful sweetener. Plus you get the nutrition of the fruit besides. And think about using just a little bit of sugar. Not much, but a little. There's only 16 calories a teaspoon. Okay, let's move on. Okay, peanut butter. Here's a good peanut butter. When it comes to selecting one, look for those that do not have any added sugar or hydrogenated fat. This one is just peanuts and a little salt. As you can see, the oil that comes to the top, which is mostly a monounsaturated fat, by the way, separates out like this. And what I used to do is pour the oil off, thinking, oh great, I'll pour off all those fat calories. But what I found was that when you pour the oil off, it is so thick, you can't spread a thin smear. You get this big, thick glob, and there you are with lots of fat anyway. So what I'd suggest you do is this. Turn it upside down. That will disperse the oil in the peanut butter. And when the oil comes to this end, turn it this way. Just keep rotating it. That way you'll get a peanut butter that you can smear, a thin smear, and not a thick slab. Now, with peanut butter, of course, goes jelly. This would be my pick of all the jellies. It's the low sugar grape spread. It's half the sugar of regular grape jelly. And as long as you don't use twice as much, you're ahead of the game. Most fruit juices are high in sugar, and some contain more sugar than a soft drink. So you may want to dilute your juices with club soda, seltzer, or sparkling mineral water. And always make sure you're buying 100% juice. Some products contain added water and sugar. These are usually labeled cocktail, punch, beverage, aid, or drink. But to be sure, check the ingredients. Look for those that are 100% pure juice. When buying canned fruit, look for those that are packed in water, juice, or extra light syrup. If you have cans of fruit with heavy syrup at home, rinse the fruit under cold running water to remove some of the sugar. You know, today a lot of products are made with no salt added. These canned vegetables, like this canned corn, no salt added, is a really good product. And there are other products that I keep a lot on the shelf at home. And they're things like this: no salt added tomato sauce, tomato paste with no salt, and this tomato puree, which also is no salt. Let's face it, for all the good press that pasta's been getting, it's basically white bread in another form. However, a meal of pasta with a low-fat sauce is much lower in fat and calories than a big, juicy steak. Vegetable pastas, like those made with spinach, generally don't have much more nutrition than regular ones. But if you like how they look, go ahead and enjoy them. Avoid cream sauces, though. Instead, top your pasta with a red sauce that's lower in sodium and fat. Macaroni and cheese is a real favorite. But you know, you prepare it with so much butter and margarine, it ends up being high fat, high calorie. So here's a great tip. Use a lower fat sour cream in place of your butter or margarine, and just a little skim milk. And that will coat the noodles wonderfully. Then pour on the dry sauce packet, mix and serve to happy, smiling faces. Beans are an excellent source of protein, and they can be flavored with lean ham instead of salt pork. Almost all the nutrition in rice is in the rice bran and germ. These have been removed to make white rice, so use brown rice whenever you can. To cook brown rice in half the time it normally takes, just let it soak for at least 4 hours in the water you're going to cook it in. Here we have wheat germ and wheat bran. Almost all of the nutrition in the whole wheat kernel is in the wheat germ and bran. So what you really want in a cereal is a whole wheat cereal, one that contains all the nutrition in the bran and the germ. Let's look at this cereal. Shredded wheat is a whole wheat cereal. It even says so right in big letters on the front of the box. If you want to have more fiber, then add some of the bran cereal on top of it. That's a good combination for upping your fiber. What about some of the other popular cereals, like granolas? Here we have a granola, and let's just look at the label.
it tells us that there are 5 grams of fat in 1/3 of a cup. That means that over 1 teaspoon, one like pat of butter visually, comes from fat in just 1/3 of a cup. That's a few tablespoons. And some of that fat comes from coconut oil, which we saw earlier is very high in saturated fat. So this is not a particularly healthy cereal. So when it comes to cereals, choose whole grain ones with less fat. 2 grams or less per serving is a good guideline. Watch for the kind of fat too. You don't want coconut or palm oil because they're so high in saturated fat. Also select cereals that don't have artificial coloring or flavoring. And if the cereal you like has dried fruit in it, check the label to see if the fruit is preserved with sulfur dioxide or some other sulfur-containing compound. You see, sulfites may cause serious allergic reactions in sensitive individuals and have therefore been banned from use on fresh fruits and vegetables at salad bars. So why get them in your cereal? If you want a hot cereal, oatmeal is a really good one. It's whole grain, and the fiber in oatmeal, the oat bran, actually helps to slow the emptying of the stomach, and that's helpful when you're trying to hold off for a late lunch. Another plus for oatmeal is that it contains the sort of fiber that may help to slightly lower blood cholesterol. And now, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, what about sugar in cereals, especially for kids?
Okay, well that really is a concern. Let's look at some cereals. This one has 11 grams of sucrose and other sugars. So let's think about that a minute, since we know that there are 4 grams in a teaspoon of sugar. That's almost 3 teaspoons of sugar in a serving, which is about 1 cup. Let's compare that to another cereal, like this one here, Frosted Mini Wheats, which has only 6 grams. And yet it looks like there's a lot of sugar because the sugar's on the outside. It's about half the sugar of most kids' cereals. And what's more, you can give this to your children as a cookie. They think it's a wonderful cookie. And it really is a healthy cookie. It's a whole grain cereal with no added fat and not as much sugar as it would look. Now let's apply some of the things we've learned. We're going to take a recipe here and make it healthier by substituting. I'll pass one out to each of you. All right, let's look at the recipe on the top here and see if there's anything we can do to make it even better. We're starting with the 1 cup of stone ground cornmeal. Okay, we'll use that, that's fine. 1 cup of flour. What kind of flour are we going to choose? Whole wheat or white flour?
Whole wheat.
Whole wheat flour. And do you think we need a full teaspoon of salt like is called for on the recipe? No. What could you decrease the amount to? Say a quarter or half a teaspoon. And instead of using 1 whole egg, we could always use 2 egg whites for less fat and less cholesterol. Now, we have a 1/4 cup of oil called for, and you know you don't have to use quite that much. You can measure out your 1/4 cup and take 1, 2, or 3 teaspoons out of it. So use a scant 1/4 cup. We're going to continue to use what they call for here, the baking powder, and a little bit of sugar, but that's optional, that 2 tablespoons of sugar. Use it if you like it, don't use it if you don't. What kind of milk should we use? Whole milk or skim? Skim. And by making these changes, you'll have a delicious, just as delicious a recipe as you would have had otherwise, and it will be a lot healthier for you. Try this idea of changing a recipe to be healthier on some of your own recipes back home. Now let's move on to the bread. Okay, now let's talk about bread for a minute. The main thing you want to find is that it has whole wheat. All the nutrition of the wheat. Not just something like unbleached enriched wheat flour, which is really white flour that's not whiter than white. So you're looking for the words whole wheat on the list of ingredients. Now let's look at some. Here's one. This one obviously says 100% whole wheat right on the front. That's a good giveaway that it is whole wheat. And you really don't have to look any farther if you see it right on the front like that in big letters. But let's say it just said wheat bread okay? Then you'd look on the side panel for the ingredients, and you'd see, well, what kind of wheat is this? Because if it just says wheat flour, it's white flour. Or if it says enriched wheat flour, it's also white flour, but enriched white flour. And sometimes it'll say unbleached enriched wheat flour. And that's simply white flour that's not whiter than white. So you have two places to look. The front, and if that's not telling you that it's whole wheat, look here and see if it is. Let me give you another example. Here we have a honey wheat berry. Sounds great. Listen to the list of ingredients. Unbleached enriched wheat flour. Is that whole wheat flour or white flour?
White.
It's white flour. So this one goes back on the shelf, and this one goes in your cart. So does that tell you what you need to know when reading labels on bread? Okay, great. Let's face it, no matter how committed we are to eating more nutritiously, we all crave frivolous foods like cookies every now and then. That's fine. Moderation, not deprivation, is the goal. So when the cookie crazies get to you, go for the lower calorie ones, like vanilla wafers, animal crackers, and ginger snaps. But if it's chocolate you've got to have, there's one cookie you should know about. These Devil's Food Cakes. While far from nutritious, it's one of the better cookies because it's very low in fat. When shopping for crackers, look for whole grain, low fat, and lower sodium ones which don't contain coconut or palm oils. One of the best snacks is popcorn prepared in an air popper. It's very low in fat and high in fiber. Pretzels are a better snack than potato or corn chips because pretzels are much lower in fat. You can buy pretzels without salt or rub the salt off yourself. Asking some people to give up ice cream is simply too much, but you can substitute a high-quality ice milk or sherbet and cut out lots of fat. Like ice milk and sherbet, frozen yogurt tends to be low in fat. However, the lowest fat selection you can make is a sorbet or a juice bar made from fruit and juice. But keep in mind that most juice bars have added sugar. Just look at all these beautiful fruits and vegetables. There seems to be an endless variety here. And you know, the more variety you have, the better. That's because no one food is a perfect food, and each food has something unique to contribute. So the more variety you have in your meals, the more likely you are to get all the nutrients you need. Variety, you see, is like dietary insurance. Let's talk about some of the unique nutritional contributions of fruits and vegetables. First, let's take the cabbage family. Research indicates that they may contain a substance that may help the body protect itself against certain forms of cancer. Cabbage family members include cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and kohlrabi. Also, other vegetables high in a substance called beta-carotene, a form of vitamin A, may help the body protect itself against some other forms of cancer. Fruits and vegetables that are especially high in carotene are dark green like spinach, orange like carrots, or red like tomatoes. Sweet potatoes, cantaloupe, and peaches are also high in beta-carotene. Of course, fruits and vegetables also contain a host of vitamins and minerals and fiber too, so be sure to enjoy fruits and vegetables every day. Tofu, you know, it's one of my favorite foods. It's exceptionally versatile because it takes on the flavors of whatever you cook with it. And it's pre-cooked. A lot of times when I'm in a big hurry, all I do is make a couple of cubes of tofu just by slicing it and dipping it in whatever sauce I like. Eat that with some crackers and some fruit and run out the door. It's a really quick pick-me-up.
But doesn't it spoil very quickly?
Spoilage is sometimes a problem, but you know what I like about this one is that the manufacturer guarantees it for 12 months under refrigeration. Now that we've come to the end of our Supermarket Savvy tour, I'd like to ask you to tell me what is the main thing that surprised you or that you learned that was important to you today?
I found out that sodium isn't just salt.
That's true.
For a long time, I've been trying to figure out how they get cholesterol out of oil when there's not even any cholesterol in there.
Well,
In
yeah.
the first
And I
place.
didn't have any idea there was so much sodium and fat in all the dairy products, especially cheeses.
And you know what I found out about the ground chicken? I mean, I'd never heard of ground chicken before.
Yeah,
And so
that's
now
great.
I have I've gotten a lot of ideas of how I can use the ground chicken.
Now, how do you make sense of all this and put it to work for you? It's easy. Let me review the main points. There are only 3. 1. Have more of the best and less of the rest. Gradually add more of the better choices and subtract those that aren't as good for you. 2. Choose the healthiest calories, not just the fewest. It's far better to be slim and healthy than just to be slim. 3. Enjoy a wide variety of foods because variety is dietary insurance. I hope you can see that you can make a positive difference in how you look and feel. And I hope you'll put these ideas to work for you, starting today.